actor Jameela Jamil, known for The Good Place.
So I did EMDR therapy, which is eye movement desensitization and reprocessing therapy, I believe. Have you heard about this? Yeah, I found that very effective, because what that did is that I found with traditional therapies or even with CBT, it required me to do a lot of homework and work all the time in having to which I'm quite a work shy person, and I didn't appreciate having to constantly have to check myself in challenging and triggering situations. And what EMDR did is it truly removed the emotion that was linked to the traumatic memory or thought process. It just sort of cut it off for me. So it took out a lot of the homework for me, where I would walk into a situation that normally would trigger me, and my emotion associated to the memory that situation has triggered is now gone.
That's good.
And so it makes it mundane. Things that I used to find terrifying are boring to me.
Brilliant.
That was helpful. I had some terrible abusive experiences in the dark as a child, and I became afraid of the dark until I was 28 years old. Couldn't sleep in the dark, couldn't be alone in a house, had to check in every cupboard, under every bed, in every single room, again and again and again. I had terrible OCD around like my safety, and I couldn't really sleep, so I was sleep deprived for like basically 28 years, which made me incredibly depressed and suicidal. So I went to this EMDR therapy just for that, because I decided to move to America, and I was like, I can't go there this afraid. I can't spend my 30s as afraid as I've spent the last 3 decades of my life. And so I did EMDR therapy, and within 2 sessions, and it's so uneventful, EMDR. It's so boring and uneventful that you feel like you're being robbed of your money.
What's happening?
Because you're just watching a light just go back and forth across the wall as if you're a fucking dog, and you just sit there for an hour doing that with a therapist sitting next to you. And
Are they talking to you about stuff?
Yeah, they're sort of saying, like, what's a traumatic memory? And I would recount the heinous things that happened to me as a child, and then they'd be like, think about that thing, which is a very painful thing to do, and you start to feel like sick in your stomach sometimes. You start to feel almost physical pain. You feel very, very stressed, and you're looking at this light, and as you are looking at it, somehow the longer you keep looking at it, just the feeling of pain starts to dissipate, and it never comes back. And so after I'd done 2 sessions of it, I really just thought it was bollocks, and I was like, I didn't really it hasn't changed anything. It felt very uneventful, and I went to sleep that night, and I woke up in the morning realizing that for the first time in my life I'd turned the lights off, and I hadn't triple locked my door and checked under anything. I hadn't checked anything, without realising I'd just gone home, turned the light off and gone to sleep. It takes your trauma from you like a thief in the night. That's the only way I could describe it, in a less creepy way than a thief in the night.
A nice thief.
Yeah, like the tooth fairy giving some money and taking some trauma.
Redundant tooth.
Yeah, exactly.
It seemed automatic. You didn't even clock it as it was happening. You didn't go, oh my God, look, I'm just laying peacefully down in bed.
No, not at all.
This tells us, I suppose, that our consciousness and what we consider to be ourself is more diverse and expansive than we consider.
Yeah.
That through a kind of a form of hypnosis, I suppose, that could commonly be understood as, you can...
but you are very much so like awake and like in the moment. So you're not in another
trance
place in
or
your
nothing.
mind. Yeah.
But it's somehow bypassing whatever that behavioural matrix is that makes you afraid. Because, like, in a way, it's obvious that afraid of the dark is a belief.
Yeah.
Like, Jameela is afraid of the dark is a belief, and then you can somehow bypass whatever that is. Because I've had, like, neuro-linguistic programming, which is a sort of, like, it sounds like
is
it's in the
that
same
where they can teach you that a cigarette is a poo?
That's the whole essence of it. You see that cigarette? Yes, it's delicious. No, my man, it's a poo.
And so when you're walking around, you can... I mean, I have no idea. I've been told this by an LLP therapist, that you're walking around...
by the
and
level
instead
of example.
Yeah, you see... I like
and
to
what do
live
you do
in
for a living?
Extremes.
Well, madam, I teach people that cigarettes are a poo.
Yeah.
Would you like to come to the dinner party?
But again, like with the EMDR, another way in which it helped me is that I used to weaponize food. So because of my childhood dynamic, my family dynamic, and the complicated relationships that people in many parts of my family had with food, I felt like food was rebellion, food was love, food was self-hatred. It was everything other than just fuel. It was very, very much so, like, emotionally, like it was sort of, Yeah, I think it was very attached to my emotions and very, very strong emotions. So anything bad would happen, I would go and comfort eat. Anything good would happen, I would go and eat until the point of discomfort where I could really only breathe if I was on all fours because my windpipe and my esophagus are no longer like making friends with each other. And again, within 2 sessions maybe of EMDR about that, I was able to just separate those emotions attached to food. And now food is just food. For the first time in my life, I had no idea how exhausting it is. That's the thing about EMDR for me, is that, and I know that that's not what we're here to talk about, but it is something that I think is very important, which is that it felt like, and you've had therapy, I don't know if you can relate to this, but it felt like walking out of a club at 4 a.m. in Camden and stepping out into the quiet street. And it's only when you're in the quiet street that you realise, fucking hell, it was so loud in there. That's how I feel about stepping out of shame and stepping out of trauma, is realising how horrific it's been inside my mind all of this time. And now I feel peaceful.
Psychologist Cheryl Arutt specializes in trauma recovery and creative artist issues.
You know how a memory from a long time ago feels very far away? Well, when we think about a trauma, it can still pack the same punch as when it originally happened. It's like something undigestible. Trauma causes dysregulation and it fragments those pieces in the mind. And those fragments can hold all of the upsetting feelings and sensations from the original event, but not in a way that's useful to us. It can even feel as if the trauma were happening right now instead of in the past. People recover from trauma when they're taught ways to make those puzzle pieces fit together and make sense. And one of the most powerful ways to reprocess trauma is an evidence-based therapy called EMDR, which I was very skeptical about at first. But EMDR has been demonstrated to change the way traumatized people's brains process information. And those fMRI machines can show that after treatment, people's brains look a lot like non-traumatized brains.
This material in an excerpt from a longer podcast or video. Follow link in description to learn more.